Welcome to a super fast video on how to make a resin cutting board out of red cedar. As you can see here, I am framing up the cedar on some taped up plastic so the resin doesn't stick to it. And here I am mixing up the first layer of resin for both cutting boards. The closest one is going to be kind of a diorama, so it got a really thin layer of resin. The further one got a full pour, all 3/4 inches, and added some white resin to it. The close one, as you can see, I added some rocks to it and added another little layer of resin, added a little white to that to add kind of an ocean wave look to it. And here I am mixing up the final clear resin for that table, or board. But first I'm going to scratch it up a little bit, add a little bit, add a couple little turtles because I thought it would be fun, and poured out the rest. Torched it a couple times because the torch got the bubbles out a lot better than the heat gun did. Adding a couple last touches of some extra rocks and taking out some pieces of sawdust that I saw that had fallen in. And something that I should have done beforehand is creating a dam with some hot glue so the resin didn't spill off too far. And now for the most funnest part of the entire video, and what most of this video actually is sanding. Sanding, 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 hours of it. As you can see, my table had gotten quite a bit of glue on it before, so I had to take care of that. And this particular board was slightly problematic. As you can see, there was some creases in it from where the plastic was when I poured the resin. So I just kept going at it until all those creases were out of the resin. Actually took quite a bit of time to get that gone. And then I move over to a random orbital. Again, just lots and lots of sanding on the random orbital. I go through a 220 and a 320 grit sandpaper. Just make sure everything's nice and smooth. And try to get the resin as flat against the wood as possible. There I am selecting some music to play. That's probably where the interference comes in. I wasn't too sure about whether or not the Bluetooth from my phone to my speakers would mess with my camera. Apparently it does because of all the lovely, lovely little lines going across the screen. It didn't do that before because I wasn't piping music into my garage. And the many journeys of the cutting board during the sanding process. Here I am trying to combat that. It sort of worked, but not really at the same time, you know? Just a quick trip over to the chop saw to get it down to 14 inches. And then over to my router table to route out the handles on each side. Have to remeasure everything because I measured it wrong. It was considerably longer on one side than the other, so I had to go back and even it up. And then I go back with a 45-degree angle bit to give a nice little edging to every side of the board. And here's when I kind of messed up. I switched over to manual focus on my lens instead of leaving it on automatic, and didn't realize that I had taken it out of focus by accident while I was moving the camera around. But to let you know what's going on here, first off, I go over the entire board by hand with 220 grit sandpaper and make sure all the wood is nice and smooth. I don't really use that one on the resin because that scratches it up a little too much. And then I go back with wet sanding from 600 grit to 1000, then 1500, 2000, then 3000 grit, and then finally with a 3000 grit sponge to give the resin its final shine. Again, this is hours upon hours of sanding. It's kind of incredible to look back on this as I record this to realize exactly how long this was. Okay, here we are with the turtle diorama. I'm not entirely sure what to call it, but I guess that's the best thing to call it, because that's essentially what it is. And here I am going at this one with the belt sander. It's the exact same process as the other one, just starting all over again. And one thing that I learned with using things like rocks is definitely add a little thicker starting layer to the resin. As you can see, I broke one of my sanding belts, and it was definitely for a good reason. It was not designed to sand rock. Now this one took considerably more sanding than the other one, simply because I wanted to be able to get that top layer of clear resin to be truly clear. And I didn't really care all that much on the bottom, as it was mostly opaque on the bottom, but still had to make sure to get around everything to get it all nice and clear, get all the scratches out. Wipe it down with a little bit of water to get everything off. Again, cut down the edges to get it to the right size. Again, I highly recommend not doing this. Using your miter saw to cut through rock. Those couple little teeny tiny sparks you see in the video were considerably larger in person, and I had to replace my blade after this. So, if at all possible, don't use your saw to cut rock. Unless, of course, you have a masonry saw. Which, if I'm going to do more like this, I'm going to need to invest in. And like the other board, going through the 600, 1000, 1500, 2000, and 3000 grit sandpapers to give it a nice polish. And you can tell when I go to the next higher grit, because the resin does end up getting a little bit clearer every single time I go over it to give the desired effect. And then after all the sanding's over, go back with a buffing wheel. And a little bit of polish, not much. Just bring it to the final luster and clearness. That's the first cutting board that I ever made. Just wanted to go over that one again with a buffer. And this is called walrus oil. It's a nice finishing oil that adds a nice sheen to the wood, brings out the resin, brings out the wood. It's absolutely beautiful. I highly recommend it. It is a USDA food safe finishing oil for cutting boards, and it brings out an absolute beautiful, beautiful luster to the wood. And this is what I was talking about with the added extra polishing. You can hardly tell there's a top layer of resin to that at all. It turned out beyond what I was expecting. I am extremely pleased with this resin, and for the first time doing a clear resin pour, I am extremely satisfied with how it came out. Oh, thank you for watching my video. I am Tic-Toc Creations. I am planning on doing more videos like this in the future of my future projects. Stay tuned and see what else I can come up with.